Hey, folks, you are tuning into Common Groundwater, a podcast by the Michigan Environmental Council. I'm your host, Beau, Brockett. If you haven't tuned into our podcast before, we talk about environmental issues across the state, dig into their complexities, their history, their politics, their policy. And from that, our goal is to bring up the story of it all, the arc, and the solutions that are hopefully at the end of that story. So I am thrilled to have Jake Parcell on from Scenic Michigan. Jake, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Beau. I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. This mini series of sorts will be told across a few episodes. A number of them will be focusing on dunes, using dunes as like a way to talk about the intersection between development and nature. But I'm really excited today to talk to you about a different way in which we can think about development and think about nature from a more aesthetic angle, from a more, I would almost say like a more local angle as well. And that's through the work of Scenic Michigan. Jake, would you maybe mind describing a bit about what Scenic Michigan does and how you've kind of entered into this space?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Jake Parcell. I'm the executive director of Scenic Michigan. We are a statewide registered nonprofit that focuses on protecting and advocating for scenic resources in Michigan. So scenic resources, not something that people hear too often, but it kind of refers to the natural resources we have in Michigan and their aesthetic appeal. So this covers everything from the built environment that you see in your scenic cityscapes, which can be affected by things such as unscreened junkyards or even traditional blight, all the way through our scenic byways, which be marred by billboards along some of our most scenic drives, the tunnel of trees, up on the Leelanau Peninsula, etc., all the way to our view sheds that allow you to view our Great Lakes. And even as you'll see behind me, if you're watching the video portion, our night skies. So there's a lot that we encompass and we cover through our advocacy work. We provide a lot of support for local governments and members of people on planning commission, city council, and concerned members of the public who need a new lens to focus when looking at development and how it interplays with kind of the scenic and aesthetic resources our state provides. For me, I've been here, I almost forgot, for since 2021 when I became the executive director. I'm here in a part-time role, but I'm the only staff member. We have a board of directors comprised of volunteers. There's 11 of them currently. And we are a member of the Michigan Environmental Council. We have our mailing address in line with yours. So you guys are an amazing partner to us that helps us do this work in the state. And I actually found out about us, as we'll get into when we talk through some of the resources that Scenic Michigan provides that I found when I was in grad school. So it's been an organization with a lot of meaning for myself and one that I'm happy to be taking up the cause for.
That's great. And I got to say, I'm especially happy today to talk about this issue or these issues with you too, because I feel like the way that I entered the environmental space was a bit through like thinking about what makes the communities we live in great. I kind of came in from like the sustainable cities route. That was always like the thing that geeked me out the most about the environment. And so this really speaks to me at its core, right? Like we'll end up talking about like sign ordinances and the like. And that's like that's what I grew up on like in college, right? So this will be good.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of sign ordinances, I think that kind of leads into maybe some of the ways in which the scenery of Michigan is troubled by some portions of development. You and I kind of talked online a little bit beforehand about scenic blight or about like site pollution. Could you talk a little bit about what that is in general and maybe some of the ways it manifests across Michigan?
Yeah, of course. So really, there's a lot of facets that are implemented when you look at scenic blight or visual blight. Billboards are a huge one we'll talk about in a moment. That is kind of our flagship issue. We're a partner organization of Scenic America. So Scenic America covers a lot more of grounding of utility wires and different types of infrastructure improvements that focuses kind of on what interrupts your viewscape. So it's people listening to this should be no stranger to kind of the resources that Michigan has, which makes us a wonderful state to travel to. And to enjoy. We have a ton of nature. We're relatively large. We have a lot of coastline. and a lot of space that's untouched. So when you look at a drive you're making on your way up north, let's just say I'm in Metro Detroit, and if I'm going to Traverse City for the weekend, when you get past kind of the development area north of Lansing and Saginaw, it's untouched, beautiful trees, especially in fall. And things that come in and kind of mar those that can be distractions are billboards or roadway signs. If you're going through a community, it could be something like a kind of unwanted land use, like a junkyard right up on the highway that disrupts your view, distracts you, and takes away from some of the appeal for you traveling throughout the state. We get a lot of this on coastlines, particularly people building in front of other developments or encroaching on beaches. So dunes is a really good example that this podcast has to talk about, different types of development in dune areas and in natural areas. And it goes all the way to looking at lights as well. Like I mentioned before, and I'll plug at the end, my background is a picture of some aurora in northern Michigan, in Marquette, and it's really comes down to light control, why you're able to see that. So we work in a lot of different areas to help preserve and kind of recognize and spread awareness of what visual blight can be.
And I really like this too, because it gets at an angle of, from an environmental perspective, it gets at an angle of environmentalism that I think maybe we as a larger environmental movement sometimes forget. And that's like, as something you mentioned, like the aesthetics of it all. Like,
yeah,
as much as I think you and I probably value the inherent value of like nature preserved and the benefits it brings to humanity, to wildlife. We like to be in nature because it looks really pretty too. And Michigan has a lot of really pretty places. And this, I think I like that Scenic Michigan really embraces that as a way to talk about the ways in which development and nature kind of work together or sometimes work against each other.
Yeah, 100%.
You mentioned your flagship issue, and I'd love to maybe start out talking about that. You have Scenic Michigan has a few different projects that really make up its core of its programming, but sign work is kind of the forefront issue. Could you talk a little bit about that work and how it's kind of shaped and come about?
Yeah, of course. So Scenic Michigan, in its roots, is an organization that was founded as part of a billboard control task force. So billboards is our flagship issue in sign control. What we have done with this is help work through advocacy means to the Michigan State Legislature and to local communities to raise awareness of what sign pollution is. As I mentioned before, things that kind of mar your view line, they can be distracting and in a sense that way dangerous for vehicular travel throughout the state, and different types of advertising mechanisms that are on billboards. The biggest issue recently is the more widespread advent of digital billboards, signs that change every 8 seconds. They can be distracting, really well lit, take your eyes off the road as you're traveling, and things like vegetation management around billboards that can lead to just tree clearing, carving out areas of natural space along some of our major thoroughfares. So we have a document that we have for sale on our website called our Sign Regulation Guidebook. It's a really amazing tool for planners, planning commissioners, city council members, and interested members of the public that want to learn more about thoughtful sign control. It's something that we think is really important. That is the document that drew me into learning what Scenic Michigan was. As a future planner, while I was in grad school, I stumbled upon this in my first job and have been connected with the organization since. So it really is a really big issue. It has a lot of state stakeholders, a lot of local control stakeholders. It's definitely the most calls we get from members of the public concerned about this type of development. So it's significant, it's widespread, and it's constantly changing. There's a lot of legal litigation that has happened all the way up to the Supreme Court with billboards and their placement and what they can have for content. So we stay on top of that and provide updates for our members, and then we work really hard to spread our resources out and let people know what different sign controls there are in the state. All the way down to, on our website, having a catalog also of sign ordinances from about the 100 most populated cities and townships in the state. So you can use those as best practices, or if you're a community member, go in and find yours as you're preparing to go to a city council or planning commission meeting.
That's great. And if you check the link in the description of this podcast episode, we'll have a link to the scenicmichigan.org website. And I know that that ordinance guidebook is up front and center on there. So for folks that are interested, we'll have an easy way for y'all to find that. I found in my time in the advocacy space that sometimes the things we advocate for, people just don't necessarily realize are things that can be made for the better, right? Like we go about our day seeing billboards all the time and not necessarily think like, hey, we don't have to have them this way. Is that kind of the case as you're talking with folks, whether they're in like local government or who are concerned about signs? Is that something that kind of pops up?
Yeah, 100%. The biggest thing right now is conversion from a static billboard, which is a traditional non-moving billboard, to a digitized billboard that changes so frequently. And it really is a significant safety concern. If you go to our partner website for Scenic America, there's countless studies that I encourage people to look at and reference if a billboard issue arises in your state that directly leads into the safety and kind of difficulty of navigating billboards in these spaces.
Awesome. Well, of course, when we have sign ordinances or ways to like, promote or regulate signage, that naturally brings out the natural beauty in these places that might otherwise be covered by signs. But another way that can kind of manifest too is through scenic byways, and I think scenic easements as well. Could you talk a bit about what those are and how those promote the scenic beauty of Michigan?
Yeah, of course. Scenic Byways is a really interesting program. So again, on our website, we have a tab about this with an inventory report of scenic roads in Michigan. MDOT has a lot of resources for this as well. There's a driving guide published by the Michigan Department of Transportation. And then the Federal Highway Administration has information about America's byways as well. So scenic byways, or in Michigan, as MDOT formally calls them, pure Michigan byways, are a roadway that is designated, state controlled, that is designated for some type of scenic function. There's really notable ones in the state is like the Tunnel of Trees, ones that have relatively unmarred viewscapes where people go exclusively just to drive. In many communities, these could even be types of historic roads with a lot of community significance and importance. There's one from Houghton up to Copper Harbor, and ones that span most of the lake line and lake shore of Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. So scenic byways are a really useful tool for communities to engage with the state and engage with their local population. Designate their road as something special, which is something many people already know they have. If you have a road that you drive that is lined beautifully with trees or right along the water, then you know in particular that that's something that should be protected. I encourage you to reach out for the state for it. Something that recently has received a lot more funding as well through the state. I believe the Federal Highway or the U.S. Senate and then the Federal Highway Administration have earmarked millions of dollars in the past 3 years for this program. And MDOT has recently brought back on a scenic byway full-time coordinator. So it's something that's really interesting from a method of conservation, protecting something around a development. And in that aspect, the development's a road. So just making sure that people, while they are traveling, can enjoy their travel, and that they have the resources to be able to do so.
I like it too because, well, first, it's like that natural combo of promoting or making a community better, but then also making maybe a better point for vacationers and for tourists, right? If you have a scenic byway that benefits not only the locals, but the people driving through it, people all around like it. I also like it too because and I think this speaks to Scenic Michigan's programs at large, but it speaks to the power of having nature nearby. Even if it's a strip of trees along a highway or, a vaster sort of forest, both of those are really nice to see when you drive down, and they play a role in preserving our environment too. The final component of Scenic Michigan, or at least of the core projects that you're working on, are dark skies, which have less to do with the sky itself and more with what's on the ground. nearby some of these places that are designated as dark sky areas.
Yeah.
This kind of touches on a different part of like a site-oriented pollution, and that's light pollution. What are dark sky designations, and what's like the status of them in Michigan?
Yeah, definitely. So Michigan is very unique, and this is my favorite out of all of our different types of advocacy work. And my favorite photo contest submission every year is the dark skies. We're a state that has a really unique latitude when it comes to our placement just on the planet. If you're not thinking about it, we're in line with places in Alaska. We're in line with places in Norway. We're so far north that we have really unfettered access to looking at these auroras in the sky, also known as northern lights. So what we work to do is encourage communities to use different types of light control and different types of management practices that help reduce light glare, help reduce the sky glow coming out of different developments, and therefore opening up more people being able to see the auroras in the sky. What we have as a really unique benefit is that we have hundreds and hundreds of miles of coastline. So the Great Lakes act as a dampener. There's no lights out there, and the coastline has a lot of opportunity for people to go out and see different types of auroras and phenomenon in the night sky during meteor showers, different things that we try and plug and promote on our website and Facebook page as well when they're occurring. So we do have lighting ordinances for communities on our website as well to help do some advocacy at the local level. So people are aware of what different types of LED lights can do, what shielding is the best for reducing sky glow. And then we also do have some resources on our website letting people know where dark sky preserves and dark sky parks can be located in the state. So we do have 6 different dark sky parks in Michigan state parks. They are Lake Hudson in Lenawee County, Negwagon State Park in Alcona County, Port Crescent State Park in Huron County, Rockport Recreation Area in Presque County, Thompson's Harbor State Park in Presque County, and the Wilderness State Park in Emmett County. But what's really unique and fascinating is that there's an organization called International Dark Skies Association who has a very rigorous methodology for rating places as an international dark sky park. There's very few of these in the world, and Michigan is home to 3 of them. They are the Headlands Dark Sky Park in Emmett County, the Dr. T.K. Lawless Park in Cass County, which is our first one that has only been established for about 12 or 14 years. And then our most recent one, the Keweenaw Dark Sky Park in Keweenaw County, way up in Copper Harbor. So it's fun because there's resources for this everywhere, from the thumb to southeastern Michigan to the very highest point north in the state. And it's really breathtaking and beautiful. But we also like to let people know when you can see stuff statewide. So even a few months ago, there was the opportunity to see northern lights from your backyard, which is something that my wife and I sat outside having a fire in Metro Detroit in a densely populated city and could just look up and see. So it's very cool. We're very lucky to be located where we are, and we strive to help people realize that we are lucky in that way and that we can kind of control our access to this resource.
Yeah, I think it's so cool. I feel like that light event a few months ago that you mentioned really put that into perspective for me. Like I knew T.K.
Yeah.
Wallace Park because I lived nearby it
Mhm.
for a time. But it was a great reminder that, yeah, I don't, as much, those dark sky parks are amazing. But also there's totally the potential in Michigan, a day's trip, a short trip away for everyone to experience the beauty of like a night sky.
Yeah.
And it's great to hear that there's also like those local ordinances that can help promote that in our cities and towns too.
Yeah, the International Dark Sky Association even has urban designated areas. So you can have one in the city of Detroit. I know Belle Isle was in conversation for a long time. It just comes down to thoughtful light control, which is something that we like to push out as a resource that we can help provide opportunity and access to for everyone.
Great, great. Before we go off into a sponsorship break, I have to ask anything else that you want to add from a project standpoint about Scenic Michigan?
Um, from a project standpoint, something that we've really kind of put an emphasis of focus on starting in 2023 is what we call our battle against blight. So helping people to recognize and also see what different types of blight are and can manifest. We've seen this already or heard this already in our discussion today about what visual blight is, but this also comes into different types of ordinances for junkyard screening and managing blighted properties. So we had a really wonderful discussion last year with Derek Zhang, who is the president of the Michigan Association of Land Banks, who provided some quotes and information about projects that were land bank funded that led to new ways to identify scenic beauty in the past in Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. That was on our newsletter. And we also have worked to provide access to MML's junk ordinance and blight ordinance so that people can see different types of ordinances related to this. So that's our new pivot, really a big awareness campaign that we're excited to be working on. And, you know, tying it in with everything else we do is really kind of creating a holistic message of what visual blight is.
Yeah, multifaceted was what came to mind as you were talking about that, but I like holistic even better there. And I have to give a quick plug to the podcast. If Derek Zhang sounds familiar to listeners, it's because we had him on a few months ago where he talked about the ways in which land banks can help promote energy efficiency. So there's another holistic organization doing good work. So, well, Jake, after the break, I'd love for us to maybe step back a little bit, look at the bigger picture of things when it comes to visual blight and like Scenic Michigan in general. But before we do that, we're going to hear a word from our sponsor, CalSec Incorporated. So stay tuned. The Common Groundwater podcast is brought to you by CalSec, an international company headquartered in Kalamazoo that provides expertly crafted ingredients that help food and beverages look better, taste better, and last longer, all naturally. CalSec has set aggressive goals to send zero waste to landfills by 2030 and to create net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. You can learn more at calsec.com. Welcome back, folks. You are listening to Common Groundwater, a podcast by the Michigan Environmental Council. I'm talking with Jake Parcell of Scenic Michigan today about the ways in which development and nature interact with each other, sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better. We've gone over some ways in which site pollution, things like light pollution, billboards and the like, can cause some problems for nature and cause some problems for us as humans. And we looked at ways in which Scenic Michigan, the nonprofit organization, is working to help promote a better Michigan that's more aesthetically beautiful and safer for us too. We've kind of set the scene talking about all the different projects Scenic Michigan is doing. Jake, I'd love, if you don't mind, to hear a bit more about some of the historical context of Scenic Michigan. You talked about how you formed, but could you talk a little bit about how the organization has shaped Michigan over its past 30, 35 years?
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to. So as I mentioned, in the past, in 1989, we were formed as a billboard control task force. In about 6 years later, in 1995, the task force voted to become Scenic Michigan, an affiliate of Scenic America, which is our organization that does what we do on a national level, with a lot more advocacy with the United States House and Senate. But so since 1995, we've been in operation. So next year will be our 30th year. We have done a ton of work in terms of the billboard space since we've been operational. This goes from the early 2000s on, filing amicus briefs for billboard restrictions in different cities. We have helped spearhead different campaigns when it comes to advertisement on billboards, different types of construction on billboards, and then working with, as I mentioned, different communities throughout the state, probably at least 10 or 15 a year, on providing letters of support, different types of technical resources and research and different studies we can provide them to help them in public meetings and working through different problems their community has. A lot of this is culminated in the creation of our sign regulation guidebook. There's two versions. So version 2 is our most up-to-date one. It's for sale for a PDF for $50. And I believe it's close to a 200-page document that covers every type of sign and regulation that your community could ever need to draft. So we sell a lot of them to lawyers and a lot of them to planners and planning commission members. But an amazing tool. It's won awards through the Michigan Association of Planning, and we're very proud of it. Again, is what brought me to the organization when I first learned about it when I was in grad school the first time in 2014. So we do a ton of work on billboards, like I mentioned. We're really working hard to branch out and cover everything else in our mission statement. And we've been so successful in the past. April 22nd, 2003 has been declared Michigan or Scenic Michigan Day by the Michigan Senate. So every year we're working now to do fundraisers on that day and help keep spreading awareness of what we do.
That's great. So sign ordinances, light pollution ordinances are meant to help limit light pollution in signs and communities, or set them up in such of a way that we're still able to promote the scenic beauty of Michigan. Is there a way in which signs, the lights of Michigan, can live harmoniously with the nature? Can both of them exist at the same time? Is that the ultimate goal that we're trying to get to through your organization?
Yeah, that's 100% it. From my own background, I'm a city planner. I'm a planner by trade, and have gone to grad school for urban planning. So I'm definitely a person in the pro development camp. But it's all about how development is completed. I think that Scenic Michigan, and what drew me to Scenic Michigan, similar to what drew you to this field, is working at finding that really careful balance between preservation and development that makes places that are functional and attractive for people to go to, but is encouraged and enhanced by the preservation of the resources around it.
Yeah, and I think that brings out something that I know I've mentioned before, and I think you have too, in this podcast episode, which is, again, like the power of nature within our own local communities. As much as we Michiganders love the road trip to travel to places that are like stunning and vast in their beauty, we can also have that right at home as well. And again, I think that sort of relationship that you have with, and that Scenic Michigan has with development, really speaks to that. We can have both. We can have the big untrammeled wilderness out in the distance, and the places right next to us too that are just as beautiful. I'd like to be a little selfish and, like, not even necessarily pose a question, but just kind of make a statement and see what your reaction is about it. I'm a communications person first and foremost. I'm not involved in the policy or the planning as much as you probably are, or some other folks listening probably are. But one of the tension points with my job is how, what level of advertising, what level of signage we use in Michigan. One of the great avenues of advocacy is to use billboards and other sorts of signs to promote a cause or an issue. And businesses do the same thing as well with their products, and governments do that for their initiatives. But my personal belief is that things like billboards, like, that's not our only option. That's not always the only option we have. And if we can limit those, or preserve the nature around them, I think that's like an inherently good thing. There are other ways we can get our message across. And I think that also speaks to another thing of mine too, which is, like, there's so many ads out in the world, right? Or so many just little pieces of content that we're always taking in again. And I really appreciate Scenic Michigan for the fact that it in many ways it seeks to kind of limit those, or to, like, bring us out into, like, nature, or into the beauty of a city, and let our minds kind of rest a little bit from the barrage of content. So I say all that again, not as a question, but just as something I wanted to share and see if you had any response to it. So.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. Like I mentioned in particular, something big that we're working on right now, and that we're still reviewing and digesting the Supreme Court decision from about a year and a half ago, is on and off premise digitization of billboards. Digital billboards, from a regulatory and licensing perspective, are close to the same cost annually through MSHDF as a stationary billboard. But you have screens cycling every 8 minutes. It can be very distracting, and it could be very dangerous for drivers that are going through and going in traffic jams and on busy thoroughfares. So Our way of looking at this is we work on advocacy through the State Highway Act and working to make that document more reader friendly. And for background, it's a document that's been amended a ton of times. So making sure that the definitions are accurate and everything is cataloged correctly is looking at different distance requirements for billboards, different permitting for billboards that can help fund these other programs, different types of things, recognizing how these billboards are being converted. So is the solution ultimately that we may end up advocating for different types of conversion? If you have one static billboard and you convert it to digital, then there's a cap on them. Is there ways that we want to increase distance requirements between billboards? So if you're seeing multiple digital billboards in a row as you're driving on a highway, you're less distracted. It's all stuff we're looking at relatively constantly, and all stuff we have open communication with our board and myself and a few other very important stakeholders to our organization pretty constantly. But you're right. Information overload is a big thing. My favorite personal time of the year is when I get to go up north for a few days and kind of turn my phone off and maybe not even have cell service and enjoy, where I'm at and what I'm doing in northern Michigan, and finding ways to protect that and balance that with the human element is really important work that we're working on.
Yeah, yeah. And you may have started to answer my last heady question for you with your talk about the Supreme Court case, which was to say, like, Scenic Michigan's been around for 30 years. When you look around, when you look ahead at, 2050, a little bit beyond 30 years from now, what are some of the things that you hope to see in Michigan?
That is a big question. I I think that Scenic Michigan so far has had a lot of success. What I am most excited about doing and what I'm excited to start continuing learning about and then pushing out through the organization as the executive director is covering everything in our mission statement as equally as we've had success on billboards. So the biggest thing that we deal with billboards is technology change, development change. As a city planner, also I know that the city is never fully planned. I don't show up to work one day and say we're done and we have a planned city. It's continuously evolving, it's continuously changing. So staying aware of everything like that and providing the resources the best we can for communities is our top goal. But like I said, I want to focus on the other areas of our mission statement as well. I think the Pure Michigan byways and building our relationship with MISTA continually is very important. With funding coming back into this program post-pandemic in the past few years has been really wonderful to see, and helping make Michigan a destination state for people to come to. And then dark skies is one of my favorite ones, as I mentioned as well. It's funny when you look at dark skies because you realize what type of attraction these events have and how people travel to them. Even looking at the eclipse earlier this year, there was one town in Michigan that had totality, and there were tens of thousands of people trying to go down to the very furthest southeast corner of Michigan to see the eclipse. But what people don't realize or may not be aware of, because you can't see it in your backyard, is that events like this happen every month or every other month if you're somewhere where you can view it in the night sky. So helping to advertise different types of viewing parties. Back to dunes, I know Sleeping Bear Dunes has a really wonderful program, dark skies parties, where they have astronomers there. You can borrow telescopes and look up and take pictures. There's different types of photo tips that we've shared on our website in the past, and really generating an excitement about this in a way that is not just ordinances and regulation and court cases, but is tangible and physical that people can learn to enjoy is my favorite part about what we do, and what I hope we keep doing for the next 35 years indefinitely.
Yeah, I think what you said is a great way to close out this episode. You alluded to this idea that, like, the scenery of Michigan is already here. We just kind of have to uncover it a little bit in some places, right? The sky is already there that we love and will travel to.
Yeah.
I think that's really beautiful there.
Yeah, I agree. It's protection, it's enhancement, and it's advocacy all in one.
Are there any other things you'd like to point folks to on your website and beyond before we head off today?
Definitely. So our photo contest is our biggest driver of engagement. There's multiple categories from night skies. So a big shout out to a photographer last year named Allison Denman. She has the photograph behind me that you see if you're watching on video of our winner of our night sky category, which is personally one of my favorites. But scenic water, scenic cityscapes, landscapes, byways, roads, and trails. There's dozens and dozens of pictures on our website. I encourage people to check out. Um, that's one of our most fun things we do. And right now we are in a full midst of just fundraising. So everything we do is completely member funded and donation funded. We don't really have any grants that we've accepted. We are not a for-profit organization, so it's very important for us to do what we do to get donations in and to help continue to sustain our presence. So I encourage you, if you're not a member, to check it out. Realistically, any amount helps. You get different types of emails through subscribing to that. You're able to get our summer newsletter and up-to-date updates from me and the organization, and also to help generate the creation of our next set of ordinances or our next set of sign regulation guidebooks that we work on drafting.
With that, Jake, thanks so much for hopping on our podcast today. Really appreciate you. And thanks for sharing, for spreading the word, for spreading the gospel about Scenic Michigan. So
no, thank you so much. We love what you guys do, and we're happy to continually become more closely aligned with MEC. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And to folks listening, thank you for tuning in. And then finally, a big thank you to CalSec Incorporated for sponsoring this podcast series and making it possible. So with that, we'll see folks listening or watching later, and stay tuned for a new episode.